much for joining us. It has been a busy week. Chile got a new far-right president, and Trump endorses Jake Paul, even though he's not running for office. But we're going to start with Iran. It's been 2 weeks since we launched strikes there, and it's still unclear how long this is going to continue. On Monday, Trump claimed the war was very complete before adding pretty much, and that qualifier turned out to be important.
Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning of building a new country. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Yeah, not a great response there. That non-committal floundering makes him sound less like a president laying out a strategy and more like what happens when you ask your situationship if you should put him down as your +1 to a wedding in 6 months. I don't know. We could go further. I could call it, but we're going to go further, right? At every point, the president seemed utterly disconnected from the stakes of this war, right down to greeting the remains of fallen American troops while wearing his most formal baseball cap. He's also been conveniently confused about civilian casualties. Take the horrifying strike on an elementary school that killed at least 175 people, most of them children. Observers quickly came to believe that the US was responsible, including, it now seems, our own military. Yet Trump's repeatedly played dumb whenever asked about it.
A Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility
Well, I
for
haven't
that strike?
seen it, and I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? What's he really supposed to do? Ask the people who work for him? Listen to the daily briefings he gets? Of course not. It is hard to say whether Trump is being actively deceptive there or just plain dumb. In his words, I think you could say both. Meanwhile, the conflict continues to spread throughout the region, with Israel now bombing Lebanon, killing nearly 800 so far and displacing over 800,000. And Iran's effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil usually transits. At least 16 ships have been attacked there since the war began, sending oil prices soaring. Now, polls have consistently shown the majority of America is against this conflict, and that may be why the White House is selling it hard, tweeting multiple gross videos showing footage of bombs exploding, intercut with things like baseball players hitting a ball, captioned "Pure American Dominance," and football hits in a post confusingly titled "Touchdown." And if you're thinking, well, that is all in terrible taste, but at least they didn't set missile strikes to Nelly's "Here Comes the Boom," I have some terrible news for you. So cool, bro. I always wanted a government that made war propaganda like 8th grade boys making a lacrosse team hype video. And look, with this White House, that's kind of to be expected. What's surprising is Iran's been trolling in return. State-aligned media there even shared an AI Lego video that opened with a scene making it clear they think Trump started this war as a distraction. Look, I think I get Iran's point there. This war is just a smokescreen to distract from Trump's friendship with notorious sex criminal Ulrey Epstein. And by the way, who is it with Epstein in the corner there? Is that Dick Van Dyke? Dick, no, not you! That video also features the Strait of Hormuz being closed and businessmen crying about oil prices spiking, as well as a Lego depiction of the aftermath of the school bombing, which is surreal. It is odd for a human rights atrocity to be rendered in Lego. But I guess that's where we are in this conflict, especially given the White House continues to churn out shit posts like this one.
Here comes the heat from the USA. Boom! Pins down. What a strike.
OK, look, this isn't the point. The point should be that everyone in this White House clearly needs parental controls on screen time. But also, you send a ball right down the middle like that, you're gonna get a split. You've got to come in at a slight angle, otherwise there's no way you're going 10 for 10. I don't do much bowling myself, too whimsical. I'm more of a frown and play chess man. But even I know that's not a ball that's going to give you what you want. Now, one reason the White House might be doing all this is to distract from negative press coverage. CNN, for instance, published this article about the failure to plan for the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and on Friday morning, Pete Hegseth addressed that directly.
From CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is always what they do, hold the strait hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better.
Wow, that is not good. I can't wait until the billionaire sympathetic to this administration takes over the news. Isn't it like your mom saying, when you were conceived, your dad came harder than ever before? He jizzed like a geyser. Even if you thought that was the case, your ability to make it through the day really depends on never hearing those words. But that wasn't all. Unhappy at the coverage this war has gotten, Hegseth decided to offer the press some helpful tips.
Allow me to make a few suggestions. People look up at the TV and they see banners, they see headlines. Mideast war intensifies, splashing on the screen the last couple of days, alongside visuals of civilian or energy targets that Iran has hit, because that's what they do. What should the banner read instead? How about Iran increasingly desperate? Another example of a fake headline that I saw yesterday. War widening. Here's a real headline for you for an actual patriotic press. How about Iran shrinking, going underground?
OK, so even if his version of events were true there, which it's not, that is a terrible headline. Iran shrinking, going underground? What does that even mean? A headline's supposed to give you a clear idea of a story in a few words. That makes it seem like Iran is literally getting smaller and sinking like some kind of Middle Eastern Atlantis. And look, I get why Hegseth is trying to force-feed headlines to the press and why the White House is pumping out fun bowling animations, though I will point out, in bowling, no matter how many times you knock those pins down, they do return to their original positions, which feels pretty on the nose here. Look, clearly, no one behind this war wants to deal with how complicated it's turned out to be. Trump is saying that it'll be over when I feel it in my bones, whatever the fuck that means. And that's a pretty thoughtless way to approach a conflict that's already killed so many. It's not just disrespectful to the Iranian people and to US service members affected, it's disrespectful to the rest of us to assume childish memes and sugar-coated headlines will change what we can all see with our own eyes. Because at this point, we don't deserve deflections. We deserve explanations, accountability, and if it is not too much trouble, the full release of the Ulrey Epstein files. And now, this.
And now, Jim Cramer went to Harvard.
When I was doing my senior thesis at Harvard, to do some mindless name dropping, then I consider myself an average American who took 3 years of economics at Harvard. I'm a proud supporter of Harvard. For law school, I went to Harvard. It's been a long time since I studied antitrust at Harvard Law. I'm the greatest antitrust scholar of all time. But I got to Harvard. We had every single Nobel. I took 3 years of economics at Harvard. That's why I went to Harvard and Harvard Law, to get stupid. Now, I didn't go to Harvard Law School for nothing. I actually did well at Harvard. I mean, look, I went to Harvard. I took 7 courses on communism at Harvard. Here's something I learned when I went to took economics at Harvard. Class at Harvard. Took that stupid corporate law course at Harvard. Got an A in it. I actually had the highest grade on my generals in my major at Harvard. You know, when I was at Harvard, hey, drop that. Had to mention Harvard because I'm a jerk.
Moving on. Our main story tonight concerns J.D. Vance. Sworn in at just 40 years old, he's our first millennial vice president, so we can confidently say he's the first VP to have definitely jacked it to Space Jam. I know to some, Vance might appear to be just another abrasive MAGA arsehole with a load-bearing beard, but to many on the right, he's a towering intellect. The president of the Heritage Foundation said Vance is going to be one of the leaders, if not the leader of our movement, and Tucker Carlson once called him the smartest and deepest senator he's ever met, which is kind of like Ryan Lochte calling Cookie Monster his go-to guy for investment advice. I don't trust any of the individuals involved to be reliable judges of any of the subjects involved. And his rise to become Trump's right-hand man is especially striking, given as recently as 2016, he was casting himself as a never-Trump Republican, saying he might write in his dog for president, or if Trump had a really good chance of winning, hold his nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. Privately, he even mused that Trump could become America's Hitler. And yet, just a few years later, he was campaigning for Senate alongside Trump and adopting a very different tone, something that did not go unnoticed.
You know what? He's a guy that said some bad shit about me. Come on up, JD.
The president is right. I wasn't always nice, but the simple fact is he's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country like nobody else.
I mean, I guess that is true. Donald Trump definitely revealed corruption in this country like nobody else, in the same way no one taught us more about what a Ponzi scheme is than Bernie Madoff. It's true, just not in the way I think you're implying. And Vance has turned out to be perfect for Trump, as in many ways he's become like a son Trump doesn't even have to pretend to love. And as VP, he has served dutifully, often receding into the background, but willing to be an attack dog when needed, like when he demanded Zelensky say thank you to Trump in the Oval Office. He's also relentlessly defended his boss's moves, even when they directly contradict his prior beliefs, like his anti-interventionist approach to foreign policy. When people criticised last year's US strikes in the waters off Venezuela, calling them a war crime, he replied on Twitter, "I don't give a shit what you call it." And when Trump decided to first strike Iran last year, Vance defended him and didn't even try to come up with a good rationalisation.
I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives.
Yeah, it wasn't okay before because the presidents were stupid heads who ate dumb for breakfast, but now we have a big, strong real estate developer and steak salesman to give us the national security expertise we so badly need, so it's completely fine. And look, obviously, some of that's just part of being vice president. You have to roll over for your boss. But it's worth remembering, Vance has an inside track to the Oval Office in the future, not only because polls show him leading the Republican field for 2028, but also because if this guy doesn't make it through his term either, because the 25th Amendment got invoked or his internal organs decided, you know what, dude, you can't keep doing this to us, we're out, J.D. Vance will become president. So before things reach that point, it feels like tonight, it may be worth looking at J.D. Vance, what he stands for, and who he might be without Donald Trump. And I'll skip over his early life because it's been well chronicled in his best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, voted 2016's #1 Christmas gift by Oh Fuck, Emergency Airport Purchases magazine. If you haven't read it, long story short, he was raised in Ohio by a mother who battled an opioid addiction and his loudmouth grandmother before a stint in the military in Iraq and attending Yale Law School. If you want to know more, you can read the book or just watch the movie adaptation featuring this scene where his grandmother catches Vance smoking weed and decides to raise him herself.
Oh, I don't give a rat fart what you're smoking, kid. If you think you're hiding it, honey, you're dumb as a bag of hair. Pack up.
For what?
What are you doing?
I'm taking him.
Oh, where?
To live with me. And if you got a problem with that, you can talk to the barrel of my gun.
Listen. This is a pro-Glenn Close show. Always has been, always will be. That being said, no, I do not like what I am seeing there. The only good thing, and I mean the only good thing, that came out of that film is the fact that when Glenn Close was nominated for Best Supporting Actress and attended the Academy Awards, she was approached by Lil Rel for a music trivia game, and this happened.
You know how to do the butt. Quit, turn it up. Come on, let's see it. Let me see you do the butt. Let's see it.
Yeah, that was 8-time Oscar nominee Glenn Close doing the butt on camera. So, Hillbilly Elegy was a terrible film, but let's not say it didn't give us anything. Anyway, Vance's book hit stores during Trump's first run for the White House, making him a hot commodity for news shows looking for someone to explain the grievances of the white working class. And at the time, he struck what seemed to be a fairly moderate tone.
I think that this election is really having a negative effect, especially on the white working class, right? Because I think a lot of these grievances are legitimate, but what it's doing is it's giving people an excuse to point the finger at someone else. It's point the finger at Mexican immigrants or Chinese trade or the Democratic elites or whatever else. And sometimes these villains are legitimate. I think it's totally fair to say that the policy elites of the Democratic Party haven't been totally concerned about the white working class. But at the same time, fundamentally what's going on and what Donald Trump has done is change the focus of the white working class from a sort of engaged and constructive politics to a politics of pointing the finger.
So watching that now feels weird for a number of reasons. First, I never thought I'd long for J.D. Vance's beard, but it turns out the thing none of us needed from him was more face. Without a beard, he looks like Radio Shack's assistant store manager of the year 1998. He looks like he played Cartman in a live-action South Park movie, but also, it is strange to see such a nuanced tone from a guy who's since become such a troll. It'd be like finding old videos of your dog eating with a fork and a knife. What the fuck? Yesterday, I watched you take a shit and then eat it mouth first. How on earth did we get from this to that? And while that may sound like a fairly even-handed critique, since then, Vance has clearly picked a side between blaming the elites of the Democratic Party and finger-pointing Republicans. And some of that may have to do with his mentor, Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal and Palantir, and a man who looks like he got stuck trying to anamorph between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Vance has said of Thiel that if there's something interesting going on and I want to bounce ideas off of a very fascinating and knowledgeable person, I'll give him a call, which is worrying given Thiel holds some troubling views. In 2009, he wrote that he no longer believed that freedom and democracy were compatible, and more recently called the quest for diversity very evil, as well as giving multiple lectures around the idea that critics of technology or AI are legionnaires of the Antichrist. Thiel is a huge influence on Vance, who's attributed pretty much his entire career to Thiel's mentorship. They met when Thiel spoke at Yale, when Vance was a student, and Thiel later wound up hiring him and eventually investing in his venture capital firm. He then backed Vance's 2022 Senate campaign with, at that point, the largest amount given to a single candidate in congressional history. That campaign, by the way, gave us this political ad with a truly iconic opening line, written by Vance himself, that somehow gets worse from there.
Are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? The media calls us racist for wanting to build Trump's wall. They censor us, but it doesn't change the truth. Joe Biden's open border is killing Ohioans, with more illegal drugs and more Democrat voters pouring into this country. This issue is personal. I nearly lost my mother to the poison coming across our border. No child should grow up an orphan. I'm J.D. Vance, and I approve this message because whatever they call us, we will put America first.
That whole ad has a terrible vibe, and I don't think anything could fix it. Not even the fact that you could sing the beginning to the opening of Bohemian Rhapsody and it scans perfectly. Are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? Two questions, by the way. He never ends up answering them. It was during that campaign that Vance made that appearance with Trump that you saw earlier, and I wish I could tell you what happened to him between 2016 and that moment, but sadly, I am not a mind reader or the therapist he so desperately needs. Vance will claim it's because he believed Trump turned out to be a great president in his first term. Others might say he's a power-hungry ladder climber who saw that the MAGA right was the only way up. But I'd argue his shift was both opportunistic and genuine, because Vance has seemed to have journeyed farther and farther into some pretty far-right thought. Chris Rufo, the conservative activist, has jokingly described Vance's evolution as taking him from the pages of National Review to the fever swamp of right-wing Twitter. And Vance himself has said he's plugged into a lot of weird right-wing subcultures, which isn't something you want to hear from your Tinder date, let alone the fucking vice president. In fact, in many ways, he's become the archetype of the hyper-online conservative troll, right down to the whole kidding, not kidding, trigger the libs shtick. Just watch him brag about doing exactly that at an event a few years ago.
I got myself into a little hot water last week because I made what seemed to me a plainly obvious observation that Alex Jones, the InfoWars guy, is a better source of information than Rachel Maddow, the MSNBC gal. Now, some people said, well, JD, you're just trolling. Well, yeah, of course I was just trolling. But that doesn't mean what I said is in any way untrue.
Okay, so with all due respect, which to be perfectly clear is none, saying that Alex $1 billion in defamation damages Jones is a better source of information than Rachel Maddow is just laughable. The man's entire brand was called InfoWars. Also, calling Rachel Maddow the MSNBC gal is off base for so many reasons, including that she does not remotely give off the breezy energy that you associate with that word. Julia Roberts, that's a gal. Reese Witherspoon, definitely a gal. Paul Rudd, such a gal. Rachel Maddow, though, not so much. And Vance went on to expand on what he meant by that.
Ladies and gentlemen, the most important truths often come from people who are crazy 60% of the time, but they're right 40% of the time. I'm very close friends with Peter Thiel. I think Peter Thiel is one of the most important sources of non-conventional truth in our society. Peter Thiel believes some things that are considered crazy by opinion makers. We have to get away from this weird tension that we feel in our chest when somebody says, this person believes something crazy, therefore you must denounce them. Believing crazy things is not the mark of whether somebody should be rejected. Believing important truths should be the mark of whether we accept somebody, and if they believe some crazy things on the side, that's fine. We need to be okay with non-conventional people.
Okay, so here's the thing. We generally are okay with non-conventional people. I'd argue some of our best people are non-conventional. Cyndi Lauper, Lady Gaga, Barbara Streisand. She cloned her dog and has a tiny mall in the basement of her house. But if Babs came out and said Sandy Hook was staged, you'd be justified in retiring your DVD copy of Yentl. And look, in some ways, that is a very convenient argument for hanging out with odious people. Relax. I don't agree with everything they say, just the important truths. But it's worth knowing just how closely aligned Vance is with some pretty extreme thinkers. He's close friends with the conservative writer Rod Dreher, who said, among other things, that LGBT activism is the tip of the spear at our throats in the culture war. Vance also wrote a glowing blurb for a book co-written by the far-right activist Jack Posobiec, who promoted the Pizzagate hoax, a book, by the way, called Unhumans, a term that it uses for people on the left who it says undo civilization itself. He's also expressed admiration for Curtis Yarvin, a self-proclaimed neo-reactionary, who's not only said things like, we should put the church blacks in charge of the ghetto blacks, he's also argued for a policy he called RAGE, retire all government employees to seize and consolidate power. That thought clearly made its way into Vance's head and then straight back out of his mouth during this interview.
There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written about some of these things. I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Yeah, not ideal. And while many people do erroneously think Andrew Jackson said that as part of the run-up, incidentally, to the Trail of Tears, there's no evidence that he did. And if we're going to completely make up Andrew Jackson quotes, how about this one? The Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Also, I really hope in the future my fans are cool. If my historical legacy is two fish-lipped weirdbeards broing out about me on a podcast, do me a favour, dig me up and kill me again. And it's worth noting that in Vance's vast amount of time online, he's ended up promoting some flagrantly racist bullshit. It tends to get forgotten, but Trump's whole they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats meltdown in the presidential debate came after Vance elevated a false rumour that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio were eating people's pets. And after it all blew up and it became clear that the whole thing was total nonsense, Vance doubled down in a pretty revealing way.
When you have a lot of people saying, my pets are being abducted, or geese at the city pond are being abducted and slaughtered right in front of us, this is crazy stuff. And again, whether those exact rumors turn out to be mostly true, somewhat true, whatever the case may be, Caitlin, this town has been ravaged by 20,000 migrants coming in. Healthcare costs are up. Housing costs are up. communicable diseases like HIV and TB have skyrocketed in this small Ohio town. This is what Kamala Harris's border policies have done. And I think it's interesting, Caitlin, that the media didn't care about the carnage wrought by these policies until we turned it into a meme about cats.
Okay, first, just a quick shout out to this look on Caitlin Collins' face. Because her eyes are saying what we are all thinking there, which is this guy for fucking real right now? Second, you didn't turn it into a meme about cats. You shared misinformation that turned a whole town upside down. And it wasn't even the fun kind of misinformation, like when that same summer, everyone got convinced J.D. Vance had fucked a couch, a theory that went so viral it led to us calling Vance's team and asking, has the senator ever had sex with a couch? To which, by the way, they hung up on us. We then emailed them the same question, as well as asking, what about sex with a latex glove stuffed between two couch cushions? Has Senator Vance ever had sex with any other furniture or household items? And anything else you'd like to add at this time? And they still haven't responded to us, which isn't exactly a resounding no, is it? And it's not like it is hard to deny that you fucked a couch. In fact, if you email has John Oliver fucked a couch at hasjohnoliverfuckedacouch.com and ask if I have fucked one, I promise you'll be emailed right back with an answer of no way. Anyway, that exchange is basically J.D. Vance in a nutshell. He told a racist lie he found on social media, doubled down, then tried to play the you elites don't get it card to huff his way out of the whole thing. And at this point, it's probably worth talking about where J.D. Vance's political evolution has taken him, because it's pretty grim. On immigration, he's argued that while he bears no personal animus toward immigrants, they're the cause of many problems Americans face. He's claimed we're bankrupting a lot of hospitals by forcing them to provide care for people who don't have the legal right to be in our country. And he said that illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. Two assertions, by the way, that have been soundly rejected by experts. And when he's talking about immigrants to conservative audiences, the mask can slip all the way off.
There is a logic to what the Democrats are trying to do. It's disgusting, but there's a logic to it. They want illegal aliens to steal everybody's job, and now they want illegal aliens to steal everybody's vote.
It is totally reasonable and acceptable for American citizens to look at their next door neighbors and say, I want to live next to people who I have something in common with. I don't want to live next to 4 families of strangers.
Look, the thing on immigration is that no one can avoid that it has made our societies poorer, less safe, less prosperous, and less advanced.
OK, that is just route 1 bigotry. Also, it's a bit of a tell to say that you want to be able to look at your neighbours and have something in common with them. That only really means one thing. And for what it's worth here, I don't think most people's biggest priority in neighbours is having something in common with them. It's just hoping and praying that they don't have a creepy trampoline kid who stares in your windows all day. Can you just bounce the other way? Can you do another way bounce? But remarks like those are part of a pattern of Vance expressing anxiety that immigrants could replace Americans. With lines like, you can't have so many people coming to the country at a time when our own families aren't replicating themselves. And that gets to another of his major obsessions, which is Americans having more children. To hear him tell it, it's an existential crisis. He's complained about the childless left and said the rejection of the American family is perhaps the most pernicious and evil thing the left has done, which is both untrue and just ridiculous. The most evil thing the left has ever done would be, hands down, these fucking candles. But this is a big deal to Vance. Over the years, he's repeatedly focused on prominent Democrats who didn't at that point have kids, among them AOC and Pete Buttigieg, to draw some sweeping conclusions.
There are just these basic cadences of life that I think are really powerful and really, really valuable when you have kids in your life. And the fact that so many people, especially in America's leadership class, just don't have that in their lives, you know, I worry that it makes people more sociopathic and ultimately our whole country a little bit less, less mentally stable.
Wow. Having kids makes you mentally stable? Is something only someone who is not the default parent would say. Because try working a full-time job, always tracking when the diapers are about to run out, what size shoes your kids wear, what they won't eat for lunch at daycare, which toy's their favourite, when the doctor's appointments are, when picture day is, which songs you have to sing to get them to sleep, how many child birthday parties you have to attend this weekend, and which ones specifically requested gifts. And also, if you leave the room, your child will scream bloody murder because you're the only one they want. I'm not saying kids can't give you a lot of things like joy, purpose and hand, foot and mouth disease, but mental stability is not one of them. And when pressed on those remarks a few years later, Vance's answer wasn't great.
Your position on those family values have gotten a lot of scrutiny lately.
Sure.
You've talked about childless cat ladies. You've called childless people sociopathic, psychotic, deranged. And I know that you've said that those comments were sarcastic, but it's hard to hear those words entirely as a joke. What do you actually think of childless women in society?
Well, as I said when I made those comments, and look, they were dumb comments. I certainly, I think most people probably who watch this have said something dumb, have said something that they wish they had put differently.
And you said it over in several different venues.
A very, very short period of time.
Oh, well, you heard it here first, folks. If you're mean, dumb and wrong, but in rapid succession, it's actually fine. And as for everyone says dumb stuff, not like that, they don't. The normal dumb stuff people regret is usually things like Army Hammer is the next De Niro, or sure, I'll have a third Gordita Crunch, but not childless women are sociopaths. And if Vance really does want to make it easier for people to raise kids, there are things he could support. But he hasn't done that, and some he's actively opposed. For instance, he's railed against universal daycare policies, calling it a class war against normal people, and that normal Americans want a family policy that doesn't shunt their kids into crap daycare. And one of his solutions for high daycare costs was pretty infuriating.
One of the ways that you might be able to relieve a little bit of pressure on people who are paying so much for daycare is make it so that maybe like grandma or grandpa wants to help out a little bit more, or maybe there's an aunt or uncle that wants to help out a little bit more. If that happens, you relieve some of the pressure on all the resources that we're spending in daycare.
Holy shit, that is brilliant! Have family help! How did no one think of this? Just call the grandparents who are definitely close by and alive, or maybe an aunt and uncle who don't have jobs or children of their own to deal with. We can now close every daycare in the country because America's most eye-lined boy genius just cracked the fucking code here. Pack a bunch of family members into your house to help out, not too many though, or J.D. Vance will get nervous if he lives next door. And while he has gestured vaguely toward federal money to incentivise family to help out, I'll point out that hasn't happened. In fact, the only concrete action he took during his 2 years in the Senate when it comes to childcare policy was introduce the failed Fairness for Stay-at-Home Parents Act, which focused on helping parents who decided to leave the workforce altogether. And if you're getting the sense that what he really wants is to turn the clock back to the 1950s, you're getting warmer, especially given he's also expressed reservations about no-fault divorce.
And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages.
Yeah, he said we shouldn't have made it so easy for people to leave violent marriages, which is just wild for multiple reasons, including, you know what happened? Before you could easily get a divorce, some women would kill their husbands. By making divorce easy and accessible, what we have definitely reduced is the amount of women in fabulous hats who claimed, my husband fell ill suddenly. That is not just a victory for feminism, it is a lifesaver for shitty husbands everywhere. But it gets even worse because Vance is also hard-line anti-abortion, as he explained in a radio interview when he ran for Senate.
Should a woman be forced to carry a child to term after she has been the victim of incest or rape?
Look, my view on this has been very clear, and I think the question betrays a certain presumption that's wrong.
It's not whether a woman should be forced to bring a child to term, it's whether a child should be allowed to live, even though the circumstances of that child's birth are somehow inconvenient or a problem to the society. The question really to me is about the baby. We want women to have opportunities, we want women to have choices, but above all, we want women and young boys in the womb to have the right to life.
Okay, every part of that is awful, not just calling becoming pregnant by rape an inconvenience or taking women out of the pregnancy equation altogether, but also the phrase, young boys in the womb. What the fuck is wrong with you? If you can't discuss the realities of pregnancy without sounding like a high school football coach subbing a health class, don't comment on them at all. So that is, at least in part, who J.D. Vance is, and I'd argue it is repellent. But the dangerous thing is, he's proven himself able to hide the worst parts of himself at moments when the most people are watching him. Take the VP debate, where for 90 minutes, he managed to come off as measured, reasonable and compassionate. Several times during that debate, Tim Walz actually said, "I agree with you." And once it was over, many analysts seemed surprised by what they'd just seen.
Let's face it, Vance looked very reasonable. He looked rational.
He seemed at many moments to be reasonable.
Yeah.
And that was clearly a change in tone.
I was getting texts from Democrats, panicked, quite frankly, who were saying, wow, he's really moderating himself on a lot of these issues. He's the most likable he has ever been.
Yeah, it's true, even though, for what it's worth, it's not like that is the highest bar to clear, is it? He's basically saying the Mucinex mascot is more fuckable than ever. That's not saying as much as it frankly should. The point here is, when the next election rolls around, if he can put that act back on when everyone is looking, we may be in trouble. All of which is why it is so important to remember who J.D. Vance actually is, because he'll present himself as an anti-elitist man of the people. But much of his career has been bankrolled by tech billionaires. He'll go to bat for Alex Jones, arguing we should show grace to those who are 40% right, but he'll happily co-sign on childless people being sociopaths and the left being unhumans. He'll offer empathy and understanding when it comes to non-conventional thinkers, but has no problem deriding immigrants as a net negative on society, and it's not hard to see what the difference between those two groups are. The point is, I know Vance is easy to write off as a charismaless arsehole, but scratch even 1 inch under the surface, peel back the beard, and you'll find something far worse. His batshit views and his bare fucking face. Oh, and one last thing. J.D. Vance also stuck his dick in between the cushions of a sofa and thrust himself back and forth until climax. And if I may quote the man himself, yeah, of course I was just trolling by saying that. But that doesn't mean that what I said was in any way untrue. And now, this.
And now, Kelly Clarkson does not like horror movies.
Well, let's talk about the new movie. It's Maxine. So what's it about? It's scary, right?
It's a horror. Yeah, it's horror.
Are you into horror?
No.
Me neither.
I have to be completely honest with people on my couch when they say they're in a horror film, and I'll be like,
You're never gonna watch
never watch your film. Horror movies, like, I will pee my pants. How are you with horror films usually? I don't watch them. Do you usually like watching them?
No, I don't. My first one really that I watched was Get Out, and that's when I was like,
I never went on a waterbed because of Freddy Krueger. Johnny Depp is always going to be the waterbed scene in Freddy Krueger. It's always in my mind. Yeah. Freddy Krueger was the scariest thing I ever saw.
Freddie Krueger was my guy.
Oh my God, we're so different. I don't watch horror. No thanks. I don't do scary. I don't watch them. I don't watch horror. I'm like, peace out. You do like horror. Do you watch?
I love horror.
Oh, me? No.
Oh my God. You know?
No.
Kelly,
No.
why?
It's scary. You know what? I saw this is random, but I saw something in my childhood, and it was actually at church. And it was this demon, and it was on top of this person. They were frozen, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go to hell or see a demon ever in my life. And it ruined me. I don't watch anything scary. It was church.
That's our show. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night.